It's funny the places we choose to feel safe. We build cathedrals of learning, brick by brick, and fill them with the smell of chalk, the echo of lockers, and the fluorescent hum of order. We send our children there, trusting in the solidity of the walls, the strength of the floors. But what if the safest place you know has a wound that never healed? A place not on any map, not in any yearbook. A place that exists in the negative space of the building, right under your feet. Think about your old school. Think about the main hallway, the gymnasium, the cafeteria. Now, think about the door you never noticed. The one at the end of the forgotten corridor, the one with the heavy padlock, the one that leads down. Not up, to the light of the attic, but down. We tell ourselves it's just the boiler room, just storage for old desks and dusty textbooks. We tell ourselves that to keep the dark at bay. But in a small American town, where the leaves fall the same way every autumn and the town clock has chimed for 100 years, there are always stories the adults don't tell. Whispers on the playground about things that move in the basement after dark. About a janitor who quit mid-shift, leaving his mop and bucket in the middle of the hallway, and never came back for them. You laugh it off. It's just a school. It's safe. Until the day you have to go down there. I remember the door. It was heavier than it looked, painted over so many times the grain of the wood was just a suggestion. The handle was ice cold, even in June. And when it swung open, it wasn't just darkness that greeted you. It was a smell, wet stone, old iron, and something else, something organic and sour. The air changed. It got thick, heavy, like it hadn't moved in decades. The steps were concrete, worn smooth in the center by countless feet that shouldn't have been there. You'd count them. 1, 2, 3, down into the hum. A low hum that wasn't the boiler, wasn't the lights. It was a vibration you felt in your molars, a sound that was almost a word if you listened too long. And at the bottom, in the half-light of a single, dusty bulb, you saw that the walls weren't just walls. They were covered, scratched, marked, not with names or dates, but with long, jagged lines, reaching up from the floor like the desperate hands of someone trying to claw their way out of the dark. And then, the scratching would start. Not from the walls, from behind them, a slow, deliberate scrape. The sound of something patient. Something that knew you were there because it had felt your footsteps on the concrete above it for years. You'd run, of course. You'd burst back through that heavy door, gasping for the clean, chalk-dust air of the hallway, slamming it shut. And you'd lean against it, heart hammering, the fluorescent lights buzzing their safe, steady buzz. You'd tell yourself it was nothing. Just an old building settling. Just your imagination. But you'd never walk past that door the same way again. Because now you know. You know that beneath the scuff of sneakers and the lessons of the day, something else is listening. And it knows your step. We begin not in the dark, but in the light. We begin with the place we are taught, from our very first day of kindergarten, to trust without question, the school. It is a cornerstone of the American experience, a building so woven into the fabric of our lives that its presence is almost subliminal. We see its familiar silhouette on slow bus rides, hear the distant chants of its Friday night games, and feel the nostalgic pull of its hallways long after we've left. It is where we learn our ABCs, where we make our first friends, where we discover the world beyond our front door. It is, in the most fundamental sense, safe. This is the foundation upon which all effective horror is built, for horror does not thrive in the alien and the unknown, it festers in the familiar, quietly corrupting the very things we hold most dear. Consider the architecture of a school. It is designed with purpose and order. Rows of lockers create a predictable rhythm. Classrooms are squares of light spilling into hallways. The loudspeaker crackles with announcements, a disembodied but reassuring voice of authority. The floors are polished, the windows let in the sun, and the entire environment hums with the energy of youth and the promise of a future. This is a place stripped of mystery, a place of rules and schedules. It is the antithesis of the wild, dark forests or crumbling, forgotten mansions of classic Gothic tales. Its very normality is its armor. When we step inside, we subconsciously shed our fears. We are in the care of teachers, principals, and custodians. The world outside, with its unpredictable dangers, is held at bay by brick walls and a chain-link fence. This profound sense of security is a psychological contract we sign with the institution, a contract we never expect to be broken. The power of this illusion is its universality. It doesn't matter if you grew up in a sprawling suburban complex or a single hallway of a rural school, the emotional core is the same. The school represents a communal childhood, a shared history. It is the backdrop for countless memories, the nervous excitement of the first day, the triumph of a science fair project, the simple joy of recess. To attack the sanctity of this place, to suggest that something sinister lurks within its walls, is to personally violate the memory of everyone who ever passed through its doors. It is to whisper that the laughter that once echoed there might have masked something darker, that the shadows in the corner of the gymnasium were never just shadows. The horror doesn't need to be elaborate, it just needs to fracture that deeply ingrained belief in safety. When a story plants its seed in the fertile ground of a school, it exploits this fundamental trust. It forces us to confront a terrifying possibility, that the monsters are not waiting for us in the dark woods beyond the town limits but are already inside. They are beneath the stage where we performed in the school play, behind the wall of the boiler room we were told never to enter, in the basement that no one ever talks about. The door that leads down is no longer just a door, it is a threshold into a broken promise. It represents the failure of the institution to protect us, the failure of the adults to know what was scratching in the dark. The horror becomes not just a ghost story, but a betrayal. And that betrayal is infinitely more chilling because it happens in the one place we were absolutely, positively, certain we were safe. It transforms the familiar squeak of a sneaker on the linoleum into a potential warning, and the friendly wave of the janitor into a gesture that might hide a terrible secret, proving that the most terrifying spaces are not the unknown, but the known ones that suddenly turn against us. If the school building itself is the fortress of normalcy, then the basement is its dark, pulsing contradiction. It is the architectural anomaly, a place that exists in a state of deliberate denial. We build schools to reach for the sky, to let in light, to elevate the mind. Classrooms are flooded with sunshine, hallways are lined with windows, and every design choice whispers of openness, progress, and clarity. But a basement is the part of the building we try to forget. It is the space that serves a function but receives no glory, a necessary void that we shove to the bottom of our mental blueprints. It is the place where the carefully constructed order of the school begins to break down, replaced by something older, something that feels almost geological in its stillness. Walk through any school and you will feel the hierarchy of space. The principal's office commands authority near the front. The gymnasium vibrates with kinetic energy. The library holds a reverent, whispered silence. But the basement exists outside this hierarchy. It is the building's subconscious, a place where pipes snake across low ceilings like iron veins, where the air is thick and heavy with the breath of decades, and where the only sounds are the mechanical groans of furnaces and the drip of forgotten condensation. It is a liminal space, a threshold zone that is neither truly inside nor outside, a place of transition that became a destination only by accident of architecture. You do not go to the basement to learn, you go there because you have to, and you leave as quickly as you can. This inherent purposelessness, beyond its utility, makes it psychologically unsettling. It is a room without a reason, a space that exists simply because the building above it needed to stand. What truly marks the basement as an anomaly is its relationship with memory. The upper floors are curated archives of human activity. They are painted and repainted, the floors waxed to a shine, the bulletin boards refreshed with student art and announcements. Every inch is maintained, seen, and acknowledged. The basement, however, is where things go to be forgotten. It is the final resting place for broken desks with graffiti carved into their wood, for dusty dioramas of long-extinct volcanoes, for boxes of mimeographed worksheets from a decade no one quite remembers. These are the ghosts of the school's past, not haunting the hallways, but relegated to this subterranean graveyard. To walk through a school basement is to walk through a physical timeline of neglect, a place where the present has no interest and the future has no claim. It holds the debris of countless graduating classes, the physical evidence of all the children who grew up and left, their artifacts moldering in the dark. This forgotten quality gives the basement a terrible freedom. Upstairs, order is enforced by bells, by teachers, by the watchful eyes of supervision. Down here, there are no rules because there are no witnesses. The darkness is not the gentle darkness of a nightlight or a closed eyelid, it is the absolute, suffocating dark of a place the sun has never touched. It is a darkness that feels sentient, that presses against your eyes and fills your ears with the sound of your own blood rushing. In this space, the laws of the school, the laws of the town, even the laws of physics as you understand them, feel negotiable. The familiar angles of the building above translate down here into confusing corridors and dead ends. A hallway that should, by logic, run straight, might take a jarring turn for no structural reason. A room might be smaller than the space above it suggests, leaving gaps in the architecture, voids between the walls. It is in these voids, these unaccounted for spaces, that the mind begins to conjure possibilities. The basement becomes a repository not just for forgotten objects, but for forgotten fears, a place where the building's very structure seems to harbor secrets it was never meant to keep, lurking just beneath the feet of the unsuspecting. Every town, no matter how quiet or ordinary, breathes with the weight of its own past. The streets we drive without thinking, the houses we pass without seeing, the trees that have stood for generations, they all hold memories. But it is the school, more than any church or town hall, that becomes the true repository of a community's history. Generations of children have walked its halls, scratched their names into its desks, and whispered secrets in its corners. The building absorbs them all, layer upon layer, until the very walls seem to pulse with the echoes of voices long since grown silent. This accumulated history is not written in any yearbook or recorded in any board meeting minute. It lives in a different place entirely, in the whispered stories passed from older siblings to younger, in the warnings uttered on the playground as the autumn dark falls early, in the uneasy glances exchanged when someone mentions the old janitor who worked the night shift for 40 years and never spoke a single word to anyone. The whispers of history are the town's oral tradition, a shadow curriculum taught nowhere in the official lesson plans. They are the stories the adults laugh off when children ask too many questions, the rumors that surface every few years at a high school sleepover when someone dares someone else to prove they aren't scared. These stories have no single author and no verified source. They simply exist, like the wind or the cold, passed along so many times that no one remembers where they began. A girl disappeared in 1973, only to be found wandering the highway 3 days later with no memory of where she had been. A custodian claimed he saw a figure standing in the basement doorway, a figure that vanished when the lights came on. A night watchman quit without notice, leaving his keys hanging on a hook and a half-drunk cup of coffee still warm on his desk. These fragments become the town's secret history, a parallel narrative running beneath the official story of bake sales and basketball games and honor roll assemblies. What makes these whispers so potent is their ambiguity. They never offer complete answers, only unsettling questions. The stories resist closure, lingering instead in the imagination like a half-remembered dream. The girl was found, but where had she been? The custodian saw something, but what? The night watchman fled, but from what? This incompleteness is essential to the horror, for it invites the mind to fill the gaps with its own worst fears. The stories become personalized, adapting themselves to whoever hears them, taking root in the psyche and growing in the dark soil of the unconscious. They are not history as recorded by facts and figures, but history as felt, as feared, as carried in the blood of the community. To grow up in such a town is to inherit these whispers along with your street address, to know without knowing exactly when you learned that some doors should stay locked and some questions should never be asked. The school basement becomes the physical manifestation of this whispered history. It is where all those fragmentary stories converge, the single point beneath the building where the town's darkest memories settle like dust. The scratches on the walls, the strange markings, the inexplicable cold spots, these are not supernatural phenomena in the traditional sense. They are the physical evidence of history refusing to stay buried, the proof that the whispers were never just imagination. The children who hear the stories grow into adults who tell them, and the cycle continues, each generation adding its own layer to the accumulating weight of dread. The basement holds it all, not as a museum displays artifacts under glass, but as a wound holds infection, sealed over but never healed. This is the terrible power of place, the way a location can become saturated with the emotional residue of everything that has happened there, until the boundary between memory and reality begins to blur and the whispers of history start to sound like something breathing in the dark. The moment of discovery is never a moment at all. It is a process, a slow unraveling of reality that begins with the simplest of actions, the turning of a key, the push of a door, the first step into a place that was never meant to be entered. This is the encounter with the threshold, the point at which the ordinary world begins to peel away and reveal what lies beneath. It is a moment charged with a peculiar kind of dread, one that has less to do with what might be found and more to do with the act of crossing itself, the irreversible decision to move from the known into the unknown. The door to the school basement is not just a door, it is a boundary between two different kinds of reality, and to cross it is to accept, however briefly, that the rules have changed. The approach is where the horror first takes hold. It begins with the walk to that forgotten door, a walk that might have been made 100 times before without a second thought. But this time is different. This time, there is purpose. The hallway that seemed so bright and familiar now feels somehow longer, the fluorescent lights buzzing with a frequency that sets the teeth on edge. The sounds of the school, the distant chatter, the slam of lockers, the squeak of sneakers, begin to recede, replaced by the amplified thump of the heart and the rush of blood in the ears. Every step forward is a step away from the safety of the communal space, a voluntary isolation that carries its own quiet terror. The door grows larger with each step, its paint-chipped surface suddenly interesting in ways it never was before, covered in the scars of decades, a palimpsest of neglect that tells a story without words. Then comes the door itself. It is heavier than expected, always heavier, as if the darkness behind it has mass and presses against the wood. The handle is cold, not with the ordinary coolness of metal but with a deep, bone-level cold that seems to reach into the hand and travel up the arm. It is the cold of places the sun has never touched, of air that has not moved since before you were born. The lock clicks with a sound that echoes down the empty hallway like a gunshot, a sound of finality, of a seal broken. And when the door swings open, it does not swing wide easily. It resists, as if the darkness itself is a solid thing that must be pushed aside. The gap widens, and the air that spills out is not just air. It is a presence, a breath from the lungs of the building itself, carrying with it the accumulated smells of rust and mold and something else, something organic and wrong that the mind cannot quite categorize but the body recognizes instantly as a warning. The sensory shift is immediate and overwhelming. The eyes struggle to adjust, but there is nothing to adjust to, only an absence so complete it feels almost aggressive. The darkness is not passive, it presses against the face, fills the mouth, coats the tongue. The ears, deprived of the familiar sounds of the school, begin to manufacture their own sounds from the silence, hearing movement where there is none, whispers in the static of their own nerves. The nose catches that smell again, stronger now, a smell that seems to have weight and texture, that clings to the back of the throat and refuses to be swallowed. And the skin, that largest of organs, feels the change in temperature, the drop of several degrees that has nothing to do with air conditioning and everything to do with the thermal memory of a place that has never known warmth. This is not imagination, this is the body responding to a genuine environmental shift, the primitive brain screaming warnings that the conscious mind is trying desperately to ignore. The first step down is the hardest. It is the point of no return, the moment when curiosity or duty or foolish courage overrides every survival instinct. The foot reaches into the darkness, searching for the first step, and finds it. The concrete is worn smooth, concave from countless footsteps that should not exist, footsteps from people who came before, people who also descended into this place and, presumably, returned. But did they all return? The question flickers and dies, too terrible to entertain. The stairwell swallows the light from the open door behind, cutting it off in slices with each descending step. 1, 2, 3, counting becomes a lifeline, a way to maintain rationality in a place that seems to reject it. The walls press closer, not physically but psychically, the narrowness of the passage a reminder of how far down you are going, how much earth and concrete and building now separate you from the sun. By the time the foot touches the basement floor, the world above might as well be a dream, a distant memory of light and safety that already feels impossibly far away, leaving only the present darkness and th.